Welcome to the Type 054 Alpha Frigate Ship Brief. This is the Zhangkai 2 class. Let's get started here. So, the Zhangkai 2 was an improved version of the Zhangkai, and we first saw her modification in 2008. With improved sensors, they had changed some of the radar's topside, like we'll talk about today. Point defense was greatly improved. And the radar signature was further reduced with more superstructure topside, covered in like a uniform, angled, superstructure like you see in modern warships now. And the big thing is the VLS. The VLS system on the first one was so bad, they just brought it all below decks, which is the best place for any weapon system to be in the modern era, because weapon systems have a lot of corners and angles and has a very large radar signature. And if you can hide that below decks like the American ships do and the NATO countries do, the better. So that's kind of what they did with this, is they removed that horrible SAM launcher that was on the bow, the French one, and went with an indigenous VLS design here. So it is a multi-role frigate now, but primarily the purpose and the way that it's employed is as an air defense frigate. It's out there, it's on the perimeter of the fleet, and it's looking as far as it can with that big freaking radar that we'll talk about, and tracking, airplanes, bombers out to almost 300 kilometers, and cruise missiles out to about 30 kilometers, and fighters are somewhere in the middle there. So it can track up to 40 targets at a time. Engagement range is estimated to be 120 kilometers, and that greatly depends on the system that they're going to use for this. It does have a 76 millimeter gun, 10 kilometer range with that. Shoots 120 rounds per minute, so 2 rounds a second. Pretty rapid fire for a large caliber round like that. The Sea Whiz shoots 5,000 rounds per minute. There is an upgraded one that shoots twice as many, 10,000 rounds a minute, which is insane. We'll talk about that. ASW rocket system is the same. Basically, RBU, same as the Soviets used in the Cold War, and they still have on their current ships as well. It's basically a depth charge. This one is fixed, so they have to maneuver the ship a little bit to aim the RBUs, and it has a max range of 1,200 meters. And they do use the Z9 ASW helicopter. The Z9 has multiple configurations, but ASW would be the primary purpose of the helicopter here on today's frigate. So the Zhao Shan 529 is the first hull of the Zhangkai 2 class. And she was launched in 2006, but not commissioned until 2008. So about a 2-year turnaround here to get these new ships deployed. Very similar to how long it takes us to get an early Burke built, essentially, except they're building these things in batches of 6 or greater a year. Just last year for 2022, China built 24 ships, commissioned 24 warships into their Navy. That's 2 a month, 1 every 2 weeks, commissioned a new ship. To give you an idea of the rate, yes, it takes 2 years to build these ships, but they have so many dry docks and so many shipyards that are so huge that it's like an assembly line. And they pump out a warship of one variety or another, an average of every 2 weeks. All right, so the Zhangkai 2 class has quite the historical deployments here. They've been patrolling off the Gulf of Aden since 2017 consistently. They usually send 3 to 6 ships over there. They have a base in Djibouti, so they can pull in and repair and rearm and then go back out again. And they escort ships that come out of the Red Sea across the Horn of Africa into the Indian Ocean. So they are providing an important service, to give them credit. They don't just, obviously they're there to protect their Chinese ships, yes, but their presence keeps the pirates away from other ships as well. And they did participate in the evacuation of Chinese personnel from Libya, whenever Libya collapsed almost a decade ago now. They scrambled some ships up, went through the Suez Strait, went over to Libya, and brought those civilians on board and brought them out of harm's way. So a bit of a rescue mission there. And that was highly publicized. It was good of them to do that. So they are, doing good things for Chinese people, Chinese citizens, globally and in that region of the world. Originally, the Genkai had 30 hulls planned. It looks like they might be building 50 of these because they haven't slowed down, and they're coming up on 30 now. So we're thinking this version of this ship may just continue into the future. But officially, on paper, they're only planning 30 hulls to be built. It is known, the American, admirals call this the Blue Water Workhorse. That's also what Jane's calls this. Jane's fighting ships. This is the ship that's dependable. It's got great range, and it can operate in all environments. And because it's multi-role, it's like a Swiss Army knife of a ship. It can perform anything. It's a great air defense frigate, but it can also do ASW if that's what you need it to do. Pakistan ordered 4 of these. There's some question as to whether or not Pakistan can afford 4, but I believe they've already received 2, so they must be paying some money to China. Pakistan operates a version of this ship as well, an export version. All right, so the shipyards are the same as last time for the Genkai 1, the Type 054. So all he did was use the same shipyard, same dry dock, same ship workers, just made a better platform. And here's what that platform looks like. It's 3,900 tons, so this is fully loaded, like with weapons and fuel and everything. Can do 27 knots. There's some misinformation out there, probably Chinese propaganda saying that this thing can go greater than 30 knots. That's untrue. It's not true at all. The top speed of this ship is only 27 knots. And that's really the only problem with it, is it cannot keep up with modern ships. The standard has been for a long time now, warships can sustain 30 or more knots. And unfortunately, the China's ships can't do that. They just simply don't. Now, to be fair, because all their ships are limited in this 25 to 30 knot range, it kind of doesn't matter. They're just not as fast as everybody else. And there's something to be said about fuel efficiency too, because if they're doing 18 knots, they can do 3,800 miles between refuels. It is the CODAD diesels that we saw in the previous class, previous version of the same class. 2 shafts, 28,000 horsepower. They have the frigate MAE top plate radar. That's that big long-range air search radar. It's a Russian radar, so this is one of the systems that they still use from Russia, but obviously they're just manufacturing it themselves now. The Type 364 Seagull C is a 3D air and surface search radar. Front dome radars are for the point defenses. Mineral E is called Bandstand. That's for the surface-to-air missiles, the HHQ-16s. Bandstand also provides the data link for YJ-83. That's that anti-ship missile. That anti-ship missile, as it's in flight to target, over 100 kilometers away, can change its target. They can maneuver that missile in flight. But it does not come from the radar that gives it its initial target solution. That's the Type 344 radar. This is probably the most misunderstood thing about the radars out there, is that one radar gives the target to the missile before it's launched, and that's the Type 344. But to communicate with the missile, they have to use the Russian Mineral E, which means the YJ-83 probably has some Russian electronics on it still to give it like a waypoint, tell it to steer and whatnot. Continuing down the list, we have the Type 347G2 radar. That's the radar that controls the 76 millimeter gun on the bow there. And it does have a hull-mounted sonar with a VDS on hulls 18 and above. Remember I said they build 30 of these. So hulls 18 and above are actually a different batch, because they have a variable depth sonar hanging off the back. Was unable to confirm that it's still bullhorn or steerhide. It probably is a Chinese version of that, but because I wasn't sure, we didn't put those names in here. Just know that they do have a Chinese version of that old Russian sonar. On the weapon side of things, they can shoot 8 YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missiles. And on the bow, right behind the main gun, that 76 millimeter gun, is a flush with the deck VLS that has 32 cells. And these 32 cells can carry 2 different types of missiles, or rockets, whatever you want to call them. The HHQ-16 SAM, which is a surface-to-air missile, they could have 32 of those if they wanted to. Or they could have the CY-5 YU-8 rocket-assisted torpedo, which uses a YU-11 torpedo on the as a payload. So the CY5 is the missile body. The YU-8 is the rocket. The YU-11 is the torpedo that's dropped. Okay. And they could have, as many of those as they want too, but there's only 32 cells. So there's a combination of these rocket assisted torpedoes and HHQ-16 SAMs. They also have the HPJ 26 76 millimeter by 59 gun and the HPJ 12 30 millimeter Sea Whiz. And as we go into this lecture, there's actually two versions of that. There's an HPJ 11 as well that has 11 barrels instead of 6 and can shoot 10,000 freaking rounds. So that's a crazy, crazy Gatling gun, but it's really good for point defense. They also have torpedo tubes. We finally found a picture of them after searching high and low. So we'll show you the triple mounted torpedo tubes. They have 3-port, 3 starboard in this pyramid shape, 1/2 basically. And that shoots the YU-7 torpedo. A different torpedo than the YU-11. YU-11 is a lightweight torpedo. YU-7 is also lightweight, but it's shot from from on board the ship, not from a rocket-assisted motor. It has 2 Type 87 ASW mortars, like we showed you on the bow, at 1,200 meter range, and that's fixed. So they got to kind of maneuver the ship a little bit to aim those. And a Type 726 24-barrel decoy launcher. And those are combo launchers. They do smoke, and then chaff is all in one deployed charge. And it's pretty neat to see them shoot those because it puts out a huge cloud of smoke. It's pretty impressive. All right. Like I said, same engines as the Jankai 1. So we're talking about 2,800 RPM, 2,800 horsepower, 1050 RPM with 2 shafts. And there you can see it. I had to desensitize this slide for you, but there you go. And that's what biologic looks like there on the right. You see how they're kind of wiggly? Yeah, that's because that's organic and not machine related. Anyway, the top plate radar, this is one of the major differences. This is one of the biggest upgrade in terms of sensors that they did. This is an E-band 2-channel radar, has a max range of 300 kilometers, but it's got to be a really big target, like a B-52. It would see a B-52 at range of 300 kilometers. It would see the F-A-18 at about 180 kilometers, and it would see an incoming Harpoon missile or Exocet missile at about 38 kilometers. This radar right here. Big improvement for China. And it weighs 9.1 tons. I thought I'd just throw that in there for you. It's a heavy piece of kit. All right, here's the Seagull C3D air search radar, air and surface search radar. This is the same as the Jankai 1. S-band, 75 kilometer range, 60 kilowatt power with a 38 decibel gain. So, it's reasonable. Gain doesn't tell you everything about a radar, but it gives you an idea of just how strong it is. It is IFF capable, so this will ping, other aircraft and ships and anything really out there with an identify friend or foe code and look for the response. And it turns at 30 RPM rotation, 30 rotations per minute. Here's the bandstand radar. This is on top of the bridge, essentially, right above where they drive the ship. This is an HI band radar, 250 kilometer range. This is provides guidance for that HHQ 16 SAM, can track 30 surface targets actively. And here's the big thing. It's also like an ESM receiver. When it's not transmitting, it can just listen like a passive sonar system, but it's radar, and track 50 targets passively. It can also monitor up to 200 targets. So I believe the difference there is monitoring means it can display it, but not provide tracking information, which would be, altitude, speed, course. It apparently wouldn't give those on 200 targets, but it would do that for up to 30 active targets. It provides data link to other ships, as well as the YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missile. Type 344, or the MR-34, which I believe is the Russian name for the same radar, is a fire control radar for the YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missile. Multifunction fire control radar developed in Jian Research Institute of Navigation Technology. IJ band radar has both a TV and a laser rangefinder. So that tells me that this could also be used for the gun. But according to Jane's Fighting Ships, where I got this information, even though it has that TV and laser rangefinder capability, on board the Jean K2, this is used to give data, initial targeting data, to the YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missile before it's launched. So the Type 347 G2 rice bowl radar, because it looks like a rice bowl. That's literally why they gave it that name. That's a lot of times that's how this works. You know, NATO just looks at the picture and be like, hey, we'll call it rice bowl. Makes it easy to remember. It's an X-band radar. X-bands are, you know, high repetition rate, relatively short range. You know, power can be as much as you want to send to it. This one's 150 kilowatts. But it's because of the high repetition rate, it's really good for point defense and very pinpoint, you know, positioning of a missile, or in this case, a ballistic round. It can shoot down aircraft up to, or detect aircraft up to 30 kilometers and detect incoming missiles up to 15 kilometers, assuming that they're sea skimming missiles. This is the YJ-83 I've been talking about. China calls it Eagle Strike because it's designed to hit American warships. It is essentially the Exocet missile. It's the Chinese version of the Harpoon. Yeah. NATO name we'll call it is CSS N8 Cicade. So if you hear of a Cicade, they're talking about this thing. It's a subsonic, you know, radar homing missile. They just basically ripped off the Exocet's what they did. Yeah. You can see the box launchers there. There's 8 total launchers, but 4 are facing port, 4 are facing starboard in these quad launchers. HHQ-16 surface-to-air missile. Pretty, you know, effective surface-to-air missile. You know, reach out and touch a target to 21.8 nautical miles. It's about 40 kilometers. Mach 4.5, man, she's fast. She'll get there in a hurry. Yeah, and it has a 70-kilogram warhead. And this is a great shot. You can see the flat area of the VLS there, just forward of the bridge superstructure and aft of that bow turret. Yeah, it looks a lot like the Mark 41 VLS, the ones on the Arleigh Burke. Very similar. CY-5 YU-8 rocket-assisted launch torpedo. So like the CY-5 YU is the body, and the rocket motor, basically the back half of it. And that front half is a YU-11 torpedo. And it'll separate. Its parachute will deploy and drop it into the water at a range of 16 nautical miles, which is pretty formidable. If you think about the sonar systems, they probably have, in good conditions, a 16 nautical mile range. Probably. Deep water, if there's no problems, you have a convergent zone, they're probably going to detect an active target on their active hull-mounted sonar at 16 nautical miles. So it doesn't need to be any longer than that. 45 kilogram warhead, just enough to punch a small hole in a submarine, make that submarine fight for its life, and has a 600 meter max depth, which is deeper than any military submarine will go. HPJ-26, 76 millimeter by 59 gun. That's the big gun on the bow. So the big thing they did here with this gun is they made the turret, they gave it like a stealth cover. You see that angled top that it has? So they reduced the radar cross-section of this topside deck-mounted gun. Shoots a 5.9 kilogram shell, a low radar signature on the turret itself. We got lots of cool photos of that turret, by the way, in the photo section if you want to go check that out on the Patreon. HPJ-12 these are the point defense guns. So you have HPJ-12 has 7 barrels, and then the HPJ-11, which is the upgraded version of it, has 11 barrels. And the only real difference is because it has more barrels, it can shoot a lot more rounds. So you're going from 4,200 RPM to 5,000, because there's different modes for these. So you could maybe squeak 5,000 out of the PJ-12. And the PJ-11 straight up will go all the way up to 10,000 rounds a minute. That's emptying a ton of ammunition into the air in the direction of an incoming missile. So if it's a subsonic missile, they've got 10,000 chances to hit it, before it hits them. So we have 2 of these 324 millimeter triple mount launchers. As you can see, it's hidden behind a door here. And so that's why you don't see it normally. This door is normally shut, but they must have been doing some kind of test or something, because there is a tube that is clearly empty. So it's been expended. These are reloaded from inboard, so they can reload these. And it shoots the YU-7 active passive homing torpedo that does 42 knots, has a 45 kilogram warhead, and about a 14 kilometer range. I'm telling you guys, an American submarine will simply outrun this weapon. Yeah, this weapon will never hit an American submarine. Okay, the Type 87 ASW mortar launcher, another weapon that'll never hit an American submarine, has a range of, only 1,200 meters. Our subs are not going to get that close. But, if they stumble upon, a submarine that's not paying attention, I suppose they could actually use this. Russia tries to use these RBG, rocket bomb units, RBUs, as anti-torpedo weapons. They see an incoming torpedo, they'll shoot these mortars in the vicinity just to hope the shock wave of the explosion will dislodge or damage the electronics, causing the torpedo to miss, right? That's basically what Russia has begun trying to use these for in war games and stuff like that. China hasn't demonstrated anything like that. Just know that these are a very short-range anti-submarine weapon. And then their effectiveness is very questionable. Okay, the 24-barrel decoy launcher. This one is pretty cool. They can shoot a ton of decoys. They have 2 of these, by the way, so it's like 48 barrels. 2 port, there's one facing port, one facing starboard, and just one charge will cover the ship in smoke and chafe, and has a little IR flare-looking thing that goes all over the place. And it's pretty spectacular, and it's designed to just obscure the ship enough that the missile has a chance to miss. It may go up over the ship. It may, lock onto one of the flares if it has an IR seeker, like a lot of the Russian missiles have, and just completely miss the ship entirely. Of course, Raytheon, American missile manufacturers, know this, so there's means and methods that make this ineffective. But hey, it's a good idea to have. And they have 24 of these that they can launch from each side. Yeah. All right, here's that Z9C helicopter. I told you can be configured in multiple different ways. So I kind of listed them out here for you. One, the cool thing about this helicopter is you don't need a co-pilot. You can jump in this thing, one man, and go out and drop your torpedo payload somewhere. It has a 9,000 pound lift capacity, so it could carry troops if they wanted to. It's kind of like a workhorse helicopter. I believe it's based on a French design, the Dauphine class, which it kind of looks like a little bit. The nose of it does anyway. It does have a max speed of 190 miles per hour, but it usually runs around 160. Has a 5-hour endurance, and that's if it's not hovering. Hovering apparently takes up a lot of fuel, but if it's just transiting, it can transit for 5 hours. It does have the Thales HS-12 dipping sonar, which I'm pretty sure is a NATO one, but they must be making a Chinese version of it. They have the pylon rocket pods. Where they can have 2 YU-7 torpedoes. You can see one of the torpedoes mounted right there. Those are the same torpedoes that they're launching from on board the ship, the triple mount launchers. It has a TV guidance for the C-701 anti-ship missile. That's very similar to the Penguin. It doesn't look like the Penguin, but the performance is similar to the Penguin missile, which is a very old school 1970s anti-ship missile, questionably effective. And the TY-90 air-to-air missile. This thing can get an air-to-air kill, but I would not want to talk to the pilot that got shot down by a helicopter. But it does have essentially, a Chinese Sidewinder on it. Can have. It cannot have all those things, by the way. Yeah, it's just, that's the different number of things that it can have, up to 9,000 pounds, including the pilot for 9,000 pounds. Okay, so I added this slide here at the last second because there is a brand new version of this ship coming out. And this might be Hull 31 to 50. Remember I said we might be going to 50 on these? So a next generation frigate is under construction right now in Shanghai, and it has a number of improvements to its mast and antennas, and like the smokestack and all that's been reconfigured. So they further reduced the radar signature. There's also a lower number of topside weapons. They've reduced the number of point defense to just 1, so that reduces the cross section as well. And they went to the rolling airframe point defense missile, similar to what the Americans use. We still use CWIS, of course, but some CWISs have been modified to also shoot rolling airframes. There's also a rolling airframe only short-range surface-to-air missile to shoot down incoming missiles, and that's what it looks like they're going with. on this. So a more stealthy design of the same frigate. It's not clear if we're going to call this the Type 057 yet. That's why I put the question mark up there. Once it's done and at sea, the experts that make those decisions, whether it's a Type 54 or a Type 57, will make that public. We don't know yet. But it is definitely going to be a better Janke 2 than the one that they're making now. More on that as it becomes available. All right, my final thoughts. Man, this ship is actually very capable. They're building a lot of them. They're reliable. They're blue water. They're multi-role. America needs a frigate like this, and we don't have one yet. But the Chinese have 30 of these, and they use them. They're very modern. It's a modern design. They have modern weapon systems. This is a real warship. This is what, instead of building LCSs, we should have been building, and it bothers me that China's got it and we don't. China figured it out. So primarily air defense, multi-role frigate, like I said, fielding these ships with, systems that are on par with the American systems. And I'm not including Aegis in that. I'm just saying they can shoot at up to 30 to 40 targets at a time. And that is enough to get the job done. Think of, an overmatch situation where you have multiple incoming anti-ship missiles from different directions. Well, you can assign this one ship to take out 30 of them, and they're going to be fielding multiple of these. So it's not Aegis. It's not that capable, but they're getting there. They're getting there, folks. All right. The top speed being 27 knots really is the Achilles heel, but because all the ships in the Chinese Navy are slower than American ships, it's really not that much of a big deal. If you put this ship with the American fleet, then yeah, it would be more impactful because it wouldn't be able to keep up. But all the Chinese ships are slow, so it doesn't matter. All right, and short range, 3,800 nautical miles at 18 knots. The standard really is 4,000 to 5,000 nautical miles, so it comes in just under that a little bit. But they can get from, their friendly ports in mainland China all the way around to Djibouti, because they do this regularly, and then operate out of Djibouti for 6 months, up to a year. So even though that's short range, it just requires more at-sea refueling is what it is. All right. And that's it for the Type 054 Alpha frigate, everybody. I want to thank everybody for supporting us on Patreon.